In every one of us is a poor person. There's still a poor person inside me. There's also a middle-class person, and the middle-class person wants security. They want that steady paycheck. And there's a rich person. And they're all inside of us, except that it's not taught. You're taught to go to school, get a job, and get a paycheck. You're not taught to how to get rich. If you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, my rich dad refused to pay me. He said the paycheck was one of the most damaging things you could take in your life. He says the moment you take a paycheck, you're an employee, and that's the mindset. So my rich dad never paid me. It drove my poor dad, government employee, nuts. You gotta pay people, you gotta pay people. And Rich Dad was not saying that the paycheck was bad. He says he didn't want to be a slave to money. So as an entrepreneur, if Rich Dad folded, I just started another company. I don't need a paycheck. I don't need anybody to take care of me. If my government doesn't like me, I move to another country because they need entrepreneurs there. So the entrepreneur is not so much the business. The entrepreneur is really the mindset and the skill sets and the different set of rules. You see, small business does not operate in the same rules as big business. Entrepreneur is a mindset first, a skill set, and rules. And depending upon whether you're an employee or a small business, the rules are different. The mindsets are different. The skill sets are different.
Do the rich people cringe and say, don't tell them that, Rob?
Yes. Don't tell people what you know. Right. Keep them poor. So my father was the head of education, PhD, all that stuff. I go home and ask him, said, why don't we learn about money in school? And he looked at me and says, because the government doesn't let us teach that subject. The government tells us what we can teach and what we can't teach. And I thought that was strange. And I said, but aren't we going to school to learn about money? He says, no, your job is to get a job. I said, but you get a job to earn money. He goes, no, you're supposed to just get a job. I went, no. Isn't the purpose of a job to earn money? He goes, you're correct. I said, so why don't I just learn about money? I can skip the job part, And he got flustered and he said, if you want to learn about money, why don't you ask your best friend's father about money? And I said, why? That's Mike. So I asked him. He says, because Mike's father is an entrepreneur. And I said, what are you? He says, I'm an employee. I'm a government employee. And I went, oh, what's the difference? He says, the difference is an entrepreneur must know about money, or they're no longer entrepreneurs. And he says an employee doesn't have to know anything about money because the government will take care of them, the company will take care of them. So I'm all confused. But I took my dad's advice and I trundled over to Mike's father's office and knocked on his door and I said, hey, I'm here, 9 years old. Teach me about money. He says, beat it, kid, But that's where the story of Rich Dad, Poor Dad started. And finally, through persistence, my rich dad started teaching me about money on one condition. And that condition was he would never pay me. He says, the moment I pay you, you think like an employee. He says, that's the trap. Entrepreneurs work for free. And now I'm 9 years old, my head's going cracking in half. He says, you never want a paycheck. You understand that, kid? I said, okay, I got it. And he says, well, how do I make money? He says, that's what entrepreneurs figure out. It's like, so how do I learn about money? So he would just break out a Monopoly game board. So I would work for free. I'd pick up cigarette butts, and he had hotels and restaurants, and I would clean and do menial tasks. And as I got older, I started getting into office work and marketing and accounting, and I was an apprentice basically, but I always worked for free. And he would teach me about money, but the way he taught me about money was playing Monopoly. And finally one day I got upset. I said, well, when are you going to teach me about money? He says, what do you think we're doing? We're playing Monopoly. He goes, no. What do you think we're doing? We're playing Monopoly. He says, what do you think we're doing? So I don't know. I'm teaching you about money. And then that's when, you have one greenhouse. He says, there's many formulas for great success in money. There's thousands of them, but one of the best ones found on the game of Monopoly. Still is today. 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel. I said, what? He says, one of the greatest ways to acquire great wealth is playing Monopoly in real life. 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel. But is that all there is? He goes, that's it. And he says, what do you think I'm doing? And I went, I don't know. So then he took me out and he showed me his greenhouses. And 10 years later, when I was 19, I was now in school in New York, and I come back to Hawaii, and Rich Dad had bought the biggest piece of land smack dab in the middle of Waikiki Beach. And when you go to Waikiki Beach today, you'll see the Hyatt Regency Hotel. That was his hotel.
Just like the game of Monopoly.
Just like the game of Monopoly.
Acquired assets and they became bigger assets.
He just kept what's called an assemblage, because that property wasn't that big at the time. So he had to buy out all the small guys. Because Waikiki was a little dirt water little town. So he'd buy out this shop owner and buy that shop owner. And it took him a while, but he finally assembled this large piece of property. And then he and Hyatt put up this giant hotel.
You know,
it just sold for $800 million. So that's how I learned about money. The reason I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad was because I knew this time was coming. And we have, as a world, have never been here before. And so is it a spooky time? Damn yeah, it is probably the most dangerous time ever, 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 ever. There's nothing to compare it to, because there's never been a world economy before. For example, 100 years ago, if there was a stock market crash in England, it didn't affect anybody. But now the US market goes down, the world goes down. So plus with social media and all this we're doing now, and so we've never been here before. And I'm excited about it because I make more money in crashes than I do when they go up. So, but for the average person, they'll get wiped out. I'm afraid at the worst, I hope I'm wrong, but I think we're heading for a global depression.
How does this play out for the average worker, Robert, for the small business owner? I mean, what does the next 3 months look like? Because it doesn't look pretty. I mean, people are already being laid off, made redundant. There's no cash flow in most of these businesses. How does that play out?
Well, let me give one more stat, just to give you the size of it, okay? The national debt for World War II was $25 billion. Every day today, they're printing $125 billion. Every single day, that's like 5 World War IIs per day. They're printing so much money to keep this think of a hot air balloon with a tear in it. And they're doing desperately trying to fix this tear, but no matter how hard they try, the tear has gone beyond, it's coming down. So in financial terms, it's called our debt to GDP has now gone from 60 to 90 to 105, it's going to 120. We're bankrupt. And they're going to print more and more money, which means savers are losers, just as I predicted. Your money is going to be worthless in a few years. Wow. So my message is the same as some of your other guests. This is metamorphosis time. Financial education, in Rich Dad's terms, is really financial transformation. And the definition of metamorphosis is very important. Metamorphosis, the definition is the evolution or the transformation from an immature form to an adult form. An immature form to an adult form. Metamorphosis is the same as a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. And Fuller always said there's nothing to predict a butterfly inside a caterpillar. So everybody listening right now, if you're struggling financially, just think of yourself as a little caterpillar. And this crisis is your cocoon. The question is, what do you emerge as? Do you emerge as a victim? The world did that to me, and the capitalists are crook, and the rich are bastards, and all this stuff? Or do you say, oh, this is the best thing that ever happened to me? The same as my health. I am ground zero for the coronavirus. All that does is inspire me to get healthier. You're either going to get healthier and wealthier, or you're going to go bust. Your choice. It sits between your ears, your heart, your body, your mind, your spirit, your attitude. This could be the best thing that ever happened to you, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, if you turn on to a butterfly. or somebody will step on you like a little worm. It's your choice.